Sandra.
Yes, I get to introduce our speaker this afternoon, Glynna Torres. Glynna became a Master Gardener in 2009 in Hamilton County. She transferred to Lake Granbury in 2016, and so she's been a Master Gardener for 17 years. And she's currently taking care of the native grass bed at the demo garden. And this time I'd like to welcome Glynna Torres. Yes, you got one.
Maybe we could we dim it just a little for the presentation?
How about we demo a lot?
That works. Let's see. Yep. There's another quote. So today we're going to talk about tips for gardening or making it through our hot summers in Texas. This first slide, I think the picture says it all, because look at the sun. That's what it feels like in the summertime. With summer droughts, and clearly we will still be having temperatures of 100 degrees or more. We may have to learn some tips, and we may have to adapt our gardens and some of the ways that we deal with our plants for us to be able to make it through the summer. It says whether you're dealing with water restrictions or lack of rain, you're probably going to have to choose where you're going to put your water and how to best conserve it. And what I noticed about this article from A&M is that it was published in September, right, 2023. And if you remember, 2011 was the gold standard for the hottest summer in Texas. And then it was followed by the next 2 years, 2022 and 2023, as the top 3 hottest summers in Texas. So I guess A&M decided right after that summer, that in September, that they needed to address that as to help us gardeners, to help people to make it through the summers. So when we look at what the solution is for hotter summers for 100 degrees or more, what we have to do is think about water efficient gardens and how we go about doing that. And to do that, sometimes we have to be creative about how we are going to give water to our plants. And also that we have a responsibility to conserve water, because we do know that it's a natural resource that we're beginning to understand that is very valuable, and it's going to be a resource that we need to take care of. But mainly we may need to rethink about what you think about is a beautiful yard and landscape. And I picked that picture because, it kind of reminded me of the house I grew up in. I grew up was born in the 50s, grew up in the 60s, and that was kind of suburban America. And at that time, we typically had like a brick ranch house, and typically our landscape was low and horizontal, and it was up against the house. We usually had 1 or 2 trees in the yard. Also at that time, people were spending less time on their front porch and more time in their backyard. And usually a backyard had a concrete patio. There may have been a clothesline in the back and a swing set. And maybe if you were lucky, you had a swimming pool in the back of your yard. But that's kind of typically what houses look like during that time. So now I'm going to fast forward to 2026. What are trends in landscaping today? And there's 3 major trends. One is now our yards and our landscaping are seen as an extension of spaces of our house. Nowadays, people have an outside dining area, right? Or you might have built a shade structure that's a lounge area. There might be couches out there. There might be a TV. You might have a full kitchen in your backyard, or at least have a grill pit. And so that an area is spent so you could spend more time in the outside area. Another trend is that people are using their yards to establish habitat for wildlife, because we like the bees, we like the butterflies, and we like the birds. So a lot of the trending landscaping trends now have to do with providing habitat for wildlife. And the last one is, and probably the most important, is our yards become a place for us to boost our well-being. It's a place for us to retreat, for serenity, for some quiet time. So we establish places in our yards for us to be able to spend quiet time. So those are sort of the trends when you think about now, when we think about landscaping and what we want in our yards. So if we're going to have a water-wise and efficient garden, what do we have to do? We're going to start by doing an inventory of what we have. You're going to walk around your yard now before it's 100 degrees, and you're going to take a look at your inventory. What do you have in your landscape? Do you have trees? Are you growing vegetables? Do you really like flowers? Are your plants tropical, or are they natives? Flowers? And also, what are things maybe that aren't doing too good? What are things? I always have a rule that if I plant something a second time in the same space and it doesn't make it, I'm not going to do it again, right? So you kind of have to look at what's kind of struggling in your yard and maybe, rethink that. And also financial investment. Probably your trees are going to be your biggest financial investment in your landscaping also. And how much of your property is dedicated to lawns. The last is what's important to you. If there are water restrictions, or for some reason you aren't free to water as much as you want, what are areas that you could let go, and what are areas that are important that you need? And it may only be the view from your kitchen window where you have your coffee. If that particular garden or that area is something that you really enjoy, that might be that would be where you would prioritize higher on your inventory of things that are important to you in your landscaping. We've talked about the financial investment is probably your trees. So if you're going to have to limit water, then be sure you give it to your trees. Now this particular article says 1 inch of water per week delivered out to the drip line, but I also have read something that the larger and more established trees probably need 6 to 9 inches of water down deep. So you'd want to do a drip and do a slow drip and in that area to let it really soak in, because the roots are further down than probably a lot of your flower beds. And the last comment is lawns have typically the lowest priority, but they traditionally get the most water, because if you have a sprinkler system, you're going to know that you have to water quite a bit to keep your yard green. Maybe you can keep it alive right through the summer by limiting some of the water that goes to that. But if you truly want a lush green yard, it really takes a lot of water. This is sun scald, and Tom Scott, I don't see us in here today, but be aware of your young trees, because their canopy is not large enough for it to protect the trunks. That if you walk around and on the west side of your tree, you see it looking like that, it's taken a beating from the west sun. So I asked Tom Scott, what do I do? I got a fruit tree and I got this little post oak, and what do I do about it? He told me, take a sheet, wrap it around the trunk. He says, do it loosely. Do not do plastic. Don't put plastic around your trunk, or a dark color. But he said you want to protect it from the sun, so you're basically creating some shade for that. I don't leave it up all year. I basically put it up in the summertime. Y'all, September is still summer in Texas, so I wait till October, or November before I take it down. But it kind of looks like my trees have diapers on when if you drive up in my yard. So these are strategies. These are Master Gardener best strategies, and we probably already do these strategies. We have rain barrels. So another way to conserve water is to have rain barrels to capture runoff. Mulch, that helps the soil to retain moisture. Water early morning, and I said very late. I know y'all can identify with me, because when we talked about this in the summertime, you're at 2 o'clock, you're back in the house, right? And you think about, well, I'm going to go out and water in the evening, but 6 o'clock, it's 98 degrees, right? So sometimes you go out just as the sun's kind of setting, and I'm sure it's happened to you that you're not through water and it's dark, right? So sometimes very late can be, into the evening. And then, of course, use drip irrigation or sucker hoses. And the last is avoid trimming and fertilizing during extreme heat. And what I mean here is, if it's the branch or the stem is dead, or insect infested or whatever, you trim it. But I'm talking about so often in a lot of our publications, they talk about you want to cut your perennials back, in August so that they'll bloom again in the fall or so, or they're getting too leggy, right? But my suggestion is, because a lot of us as gardeners, we're also weather watchers. Out of curiosity, raise your hand if you have a water gauge in your yard. Almost everybody here. We're weather watchers too. We're always looking we're looking at the weather. So if it's going to be, if I want to trim back my salvias and it's still 100 degrees, and it's September 5th, I'm probably going to wait another week. I'm going to look at the weather, see particularly when the nights are going to get cooler, right? And before I want to start cutting back things, because we know that encourages growth. And some of our plants during the extreme weather, they're struggling, they're hanging in there, and we don't want to push them to try to flower or to put on new growth. We always recommend using native plants because they require a little less care. I was in HEB and they have some Blackfoot daisies for sale, which I thought was pretty nice. They look just like those little white ones. So when we look at Master Gardener strategies, I decided, well, what else? What else can we do? So I thought, well, let me look at what are they doing in Phoenix, Arizona? What are they doing in places where it's really, really hot? And I read that heat is an area that cities now plan for. They have heat mitigation action plans that go into their urban planning. And of course, it only makes sense that you have them because it protects lives, but it reduces the power that was required from the grid. But it's important to have heat, and because the urban heat island effect in cities makes it hot. So at the very end of the strategies that are there, and the same strategies we can use in our garden, same strategies we can use at our home. Trees and vegetation, because all of those lower the surface and air temperatures, reduce runoff. Green roofs, cool roofs, reflective light, cool pavement. I was really interesting to find out that there are new and developing technologies on resurfacing areas that either are permeable or they put a coating over the roads or areas that are reflective so that light reflects and it's not absorbed like it is into concrete. So cities are thinking of ways to reduce heat as well. Smart growth, I think that has to do with the natural environment, with how we're interested in habitat too. And then the most important is shade. So if we're going to reduce concrete like we do at the demo garden, we have the aggregate, right? Because it's permeable, and you can walk on it. And this is my garden. This is a picture from one of my pictures from my garden. Less concrete and less runoff. And then shade. Anything that creates shade, it doesn't have to be a tree. Trees are probably the number one best important item for your landscape for multiple reasons, but for creating shade. But if you don't have it, then you create your own shade. Anything that blocks the afternoon sun. When I was driving out of Pecan, they had the community garden there. I noticed on the west side where their chain link fences, they have these 6-foot sunflowers that are planted all along the west side. And so that's got to create shade for those plants that are on the other side. So there's lots of ways, if you're creative, to shade. And then, of course, deciduous trees on the west side of your house. So here are some DIY ideas. So I knew I was going to do this presentation, so I thought, well, I better start thinking of some ideas. So on the far left, I went to, I think, the big Lowe's, Home Depot, the box stores, and bought some sort of screens. And I locked them together, and then I put shade cloth on the west side. So there I had just put down some cantaloupe seeds, but they're over on the left, you can see they're starting to come up. And then on the far left, you see that black area. So I decided to buy some shade cloth in a structure from a garden supply place. And but I will tell you some of the challenges that come with making them up with some ideas is that would keep blowing over. So I'd go, because in the summertime, it may be 100 degrees, but sometimes the wind is howling like crazy, and it makes it even hotter when the wind's blowing. One year I decided to buy a canopy tent, and I put it up over it, and it was wonderful for about a week until the strong winds came and then completely blew it across the yard. And so on that one there, I went to the dollar store and bought some wooden stakes, and I put wooden stakes in it, and then I put some zip ties around the metal poles. So I had to come up with some ideas to keep it secure, to keep from blowing over. But it is going to create some shade. That's a structure that I bought one year to grow beans on, and I pulled the netting off of it and stuck it in my tomato plants, and then later on I put a shade cloth on the west side. Another idea is I just bought some trellises. The taller the better, because then you get more shade. The two suggestions I make is that if you put it up in the afternoon, or you put it up, be sure to go out in the evening to see if it is truly shading, because right now the sun's really kind of in the northwest. It's not due straight west. So if you think I'm going to put it straight west, and then you're going to see you're not getting the shade you want, or it's not tall enough, it's not creating enough shade. But you kind of have to play with it. And then the last is that if you have potted plants or things, even if it's on your patio that's shaded, it's still going to be cooler if you take it and put it under a tree. Because remember, from my Master Gardener stuff, we learned about photosynthesis and transpiration. And transpiration is when the plant from the roots takes the water up, and then they sweat like we sweat to keep cool. And there's tiny holes in the leaves of the plant and your trees called stomata, and they release water, the moisture, through the leaves in vapor. And that vapor is like having a swamp cooler. Remember your grandparents had those swamp coolers you put water in? So it creates a cooling effect. So anything that's shade that's from vegetation or trees is going to be slightly cooler than it's going to be on a concrete surface or a structural surface. If you're standing in the sun and you move over to the shade, the temperature can drop 10 to 30 degrees. So it's significantly more cooler. The last, if you do vegetable gardening, they suggest that you plant your stuff close together. And part of that is that you're not only kind of shading, I mean, if it's crowded, if your zucchini may be this long before you see it, but even though, at the same time, it's also shading your soil. And we always forget that it's important that the soil has to retain moisture for the microorganisms in the soil, how important that is too. So where we're shading our soil, then it helps us. And the last comment, of course, is check your list on companion planting so that you don't plant two enemies together. Okay, so your city has implemented water restrictions. Now I want to make a point. My daughter lives in Montana, in a small town. Their water company allows them an allotment of water each month. And if you go over your allotment, you pay by the gallon. So it's not restricted, but you pay more if you use more water. So if you have any sort of restriction, we're weather people. We don't see any rain coming. In August, September, aren't we looking for tropical storms? We don't want a hurricane, but it would be nice if one of them came inland and just came north enough to give us some rain. And then your rain barrel's empty now. What else could be done? And this is the last one, is gray water recycling, tips from your grandmother. And definition of gray water recycling is just reusing household water. And some of you can remember, my grandmother didn't have a dishwasher. She washed her dishes. She had a plastic tub in the sink, and she used it for rinsing your dishes. And then she'd take that tub and throw it out in the yard, right, or in the garden. And she didn't have gutters, but she also collected rainwater from off her roof for whatever purposes that she needed. But we may need to think about next time when you step in the shower and you let it run for a while before the temperature gets just right. If you put a plastic tub or you put a plastic bucket in your shower, you could save some water there. There's ways that if you're creative that you could find other ways to come up with some more water if we are truly restricted. This is a great website. It's Texas A&M, Texas State Climatology. And I'll do another one so you can see. There it is. Now you can see it. This one was June 9th. The new one's come out yet. Has come out, but I don't have it on here. But I've been watching it the last few weeks. The white area is there's no drought, and that's us. Look, Central Texas is all white. See, Hood County, all of that, it's all white. And then the yellow says abnormally dry. Then the next three colors are drought. The orange, brown, and red are the severe drought. That's as of last week. Now, I like to watch Channel 8 like Pete Delkus. And last night, Pete was talking about this tropical storm. Was it Alvin? We've had the first one come through. It came through South Texas, and he made the comment, these people are going to be so happy because they're experiencing drought down in South Texas. And he said they may not be in drought anymore. Now, he said this, so I'm going to repeat what Pete Delkus said, that typically flooding and heavy rains follow a drought. So I don't know if that's an old wives' tale or this is something from Farmer's Almanac, but at any point he said that they're getting lots and lots of rain down there. And I think East Texas has got quite a bit of rain recently. So if we were to look at next week's, which it would be fun to look at to see the changes. But this is nice to follow the drought. So I want to end by just showing some pictures. Let's just look at some pictures of gardens. These are gardens that I guess have made it through a few of the bad summers. And then I listed the plants that are there. Now this one is at my house, and so are the other ones. And then I have other friends that I have there that I said, let me take pictures. And then your house in Hyco? Yes, it's the house in Hyco. And then switchgrass, because we have native grasses in there too. Cowpen daisy. Now that's become my new favorite. This is my new favorite plant this year. And so I brought one, and it's good for the giveaway. And it's a native annual, drought resistant. Cows and deers don't like to eat them. It's a pollinator plant. We have a monarch there. And you can grow it just like zinnias. You just throw the seeds out there and water it till they're super easy to grow. But that's a cowpen daisy, so I brought one to share with y'all. My next door neighbor, Beth Rainwater, she's also a master gardener, was in Hamilton County. Many of you knew she did a presentation on daylilies. But this is her property. And she basically reduced lawn size by creating, quote, like rooms or areas. And they've been suffering with oak wilt, so they're trying to hopefully those trees will live. But her yard is basically shady. And ground cover is also more drought resistant than say San Augustine grass. And then I love the little kitty. This is not the chef, Gordon Ramsay. This is a relative of mine. who happens to have the same name, but I liked his is in Fort Worth because he expanded his flower beds way out to reduce lawn size, and it's shady. Even though there's shade, he has some sun plants in there that seem to be doing fine. But I thought this was a very pretty landscape. So they can see pentas, lantana, and skullcap. You think of those as being plants that like full sun, right? But they're in the dappled light. They were blooming. See, the lantana and pentas are blooming. And then the mondo grass. And this is my friend Amelia, also a master gardener. This is one of those lounge areas we're talking about. It's a pavilion, for like a party pavilion. And I came over and she said, "You've got to come see my coneflowers." We're talking about how coneflowers have done so well this summer. She said, "You've got to see them." And so I said, "Okay, can I take pictures?" So there's her coneflowers. And then the next picture is, there she is, and look how tall. And the far back is hardy hibiscus, and then right in front of it, that's a cowpen daisy. See the yellow? That's cowpen daisy. Then she's got, those are all the things. She also has, it says Algeritum blue mist. It's not Greg's blue mist, but it's a different blue mist. The leaf is entirely different, and it's aggressive, kind of like our Greg's blue mist is, but it was a different blue mist. And it almost was a little prettier. So hopefully today, you'll 3 takeaways today from my presentation. One is that drought and water restrictions are going to happen, so we might as well start getting prepared and start thinking about it now. We may need to rethink our landscape. We may need to change some things so that it will be water efficient, or so that it will be able to survive temperatures of 100 degrees for long periods. And last is that sometimes we just have to get creative about the things that we do in our garden, and then we can still have a pretty garden. There we go.